All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be in the Auburn Tiger War Eagle. We're talking about the Auburn Tigers with the big win over Alabama just last night, 48-45. I do apologize for the typo in making that game 48-44, but you all catch my drift. That was a live stream. When you do a live stream, a lot of times, you're trying to get the thing going real quick, and sometimes you make some errors, and I do apologize for those who are very technical and who see the little things. I appreciate you all as well. It's great to be an Auburn Tiger War Eagle. Now, as we look forward to the future for the Auburn Tigers, we got to talk about Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix played a very good game. I think he really managed that football game very well as a now, he's a little bit beyond a true freshman quarterback at this point. You talk about the experience, he's had the opportunity. When you talk about Oregon, Florida, Georgia, LSU, and Alabama now, and encompass with even Texas A&M and some of the other SEC teams, FBS teams. I think Bo Nix has had the experience enough to say that now he's all but a seasoned quarterback, because he's probably had more thrown his way than many quarterbacks will have in their careers. So I think that experiment level, and then when you look at his posture on the field, it kind of reminded me of Bo Nix during his recruiting process. You talk about the moxie, you talk about the confidence. You're starting to see that really, really start to translate over to Power 5 football, and pickups to Bo Nix. He hadn't thrown an interception in a long time. Actually, I think the last time he threw one was against LSU, if I'm not mistaken. Also, I think he did a great job of protecting the football in the run pass options. He made some great decisions. He doesn't put the team in adverse position. And another thing I noticed in this particular football game, he was starting to scramble a little bit more educated, to where instead of the scrambling turns into, say, a debacle or a crazy throwaway, he actually got some pretty good passes completed by way of extending plays, which we thought he could do during his high school tenure. He's starting to translate that now and get a little bit more settled in the pocket. He's not bailing as quick as he used to. So big shout out to Bo Nix. I'm really looking forward to seeing the continuing development of him as a football player and as a competitor in the SEC. You talk about a favorable schedule that Auburn has next year, starting out with Alcorn State, North Carolina. And see, I can't say this enough, because last year when we were doing this thing here on Vernon Speaks Sports, you had the anxiety. You had a true freshman quarterback. You had, Gus Malzahn's job basically on the line going into an Oregon game, an all but must-win situation. But now the pressure during the offseason is a little bit less urgent than it's going to be. It's a little bit less urgent this year than it was, when Auburn was facing the prospect of playing against an Oregon team who almost and probably still has the opportunity, who actually still has the opportunity to be Pac-12 champions, actually ruining the Pac-12's opportunity to have Utah actually represent in the college football playoff. Now, here's how that could potentially happen. LSU is number 1 or 2. We'll see what happens when the ranking comes out. Then you got Georgia resting at number 4. Those two teams play one another in the SEC championship. Obviously, one of those teams has to lose. If, let's just say, Georgia loses, I'm not saying off rip that Georgia would lose, because I actually like them as a football team. I think they're very talented on defense, struggle a little bit offensively, but I think this could be a very interesting SEC championship game, kind of like similar to last year, where, many folks thought that Alabama would run Georgia proverbially out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the SEC championship. But Georgia had Alabama on the ropes and probably should have won that game. So I'm not expecting too much different from this particular SEC championship game, to where I think Georgia's got a shot. One of the better defenses in the country. They play very sound. I really like their secondary. They're sneaky good, and they play as a team. Name me one player on that Georgia defense. You can't do it, because these guys play as a team. J.R. Reed maybe and LeCount. The only reason why we know them because those are familiar names. But for the most part, for Georgia's defense, these are no-name guys really making some things happen. Now, I do know they got a big guy, number 99, right there in the middle, who plays very well. He clogs up the line of scrimmage. I think he's a reserve player, but Georgia plays very well as a team, and they're very, very scary because they've been through those adverse football games to where they could pose a threat, kind of like Auburn did against LSU, kind of putting LSU in some adverse positions that they weren't accustomed to seeing, a little bit uncomfortable with running their offense because of the disruption that, Auburn causes. And then you have the fact that Kirby Smart, one of the better defensive minds in all of college football, has had weeks of film review of LSU and has probably snuck in some practices getting ready for LSU to really combat what they like to do. Big shout out to Georgia Bulldogs, LSU, the SEC representing in the SEC championship game in Atlanta, have a lot of obvious playoff implications. You're talking about the top 4 teams in the nation squaring off in the SEC championship. The SEC, it just means more guys. But anyway, as we continue to talk about Auburn football, we talk about Gus Malzahn. He's beginning the trend of having one of the longest, at least in recent time, tenures as an Auburn football coach. We talk about Tommy Tuberville with 10 years. Gene Chiswick's tenure was pretty short. Terry Bowden's tenure was pretty short. But Gus Malzahn is starting to add to the tenure. Obviously, unless something out of the extraordinary happens, I think Gus Malzahn is your coach going into the 2020 season. Number 8 recruiting class in the country. Just signed Zacchaeus Walker out of Schley County, man. It's not many people that live there, but he is one of the more talented people in that particular vicinity in Southwest Georgia, I think. So I think Gus Malzahn, with the signature win over Alabama, he's starting to get a pretty nice trend to where he's 3-4 against Nick Saban, finally getting that 9-win season. And see, here's the thing that Gus Malzahn and his staff did this year. Unlike years in the past, let's just take Florida off the schedule. I think usually, they just happen to have Florida this year. But I think all in all, Auburn won the games that they were supposed to. And that's why in past, they weren't able to do it, because the 8-4 seasons were because they wound up slipping up and losing to a Tennessee, losing to a Mississippi State, losing to maybe an Ole Miss or South Carolina, a team of that caliber. Auburn is not quite the elite of LSU. I ain't gonna say Florida yet. They're not quite there yet, but LSU, Georgia, Alabama, not quite there yet. But they have to represent as they are above the middle tier of the SEC at this point. This year, actually winning against Texas A&M, winning against Mississippi State, winning those games that they're supposed to win, which is why they're in a position to have a 10-win season, although arguably one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. You got 6 teams that they played against ranking-wise that were at some point of the season picked to finish in a very high level. You got also, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU all in the conversation late. These are teams that Auburn had to play with a true freshman quarterback, and he continued to develop and continued to get better. The thing I did like in this Alabama game was the re-emergence of the running game via Boobie Whitlow. He seems to be a little bit more explosive at the point of attack. I really enjoyed watching Boobie Whitlow play in this particular football game. The running game definitely getting going. Last but not least, here's what we got to talk about. We got to see what's going on with this playoff ranking to where who's going to wind up in the New Year's Six Bowls. It's going to be a toss-up. I think the SEC has kind of cannibalized themselves in this particular situation. I think Auburn is on the outside looking in of a New Year's Six Bowl because you still got Florida ahead. You still got LSU, Georgia, Alabama, who will probably finish in the poll ahead of Auburn. But at the same time, big shout out to Auburn with the possibility of a 10-win season. All right, guys, once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast Talking Auburn Football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to my channel, your channel, Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.